Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah, okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about Alexa, skill design and patterns, but also I'm going to talk about how we are integrating our Alexa skill with Drupal Commerce, okay? I'm not a developer, so I apologize if I'm not going to be hyper precise, technically wise, but I am a designer. So what I want to share with you today is how actually to design a skill properly, but also, of course, how Drupal Commerce can help us with the interaction with a skill. So our story starts with a skill that we have designed and implemented for a client. The client is Giunti, an Italian publisher, is actually one of the main Italian publishers. So they asked us to create a skill for children between the age of 2 and 4 years old. And this skill is about nursery rhymes. So basically, parents and children can ask the skill for specific nursery rhymes, can ask the skill to repeat those nursery rhymes, can ask the skill to surprise them, and so on. But maybe some of you are wondering what is a skill. So a skill is basically an app, but it's not running on your device, but on the Amazon cloud in this specific case. So how does a skill work? Usually you do have a user, of course, that is talking to an Echo device, like in this case. Then the device is looking for the answer that the user is asking into the cloud, so the Amazon cloud specifically, and to the artificial intelligence that it's called Alexa. Sometimes the answer is coming directly from the artificial intelligence. Some other times it's inside your skill. But what I can tell you is that, and I think that's actually a very good news for you guys, the implementation part is not that hard. The hard part, it's actually the design, because you have to think about many, many things. First of all, we don't have a graphical interface, and that's not something we are very used to. And secondly, I think we are now in a kind of moment of shift, technologically wise. It's really close to the same shift we had when the first touch interfaces came to light. So it's a moment in which we are probably very used to old metaphors, like at the moment, the metaphor coming from the touch interface, but also the one coming from the computer and the keyboard. And we might have the idea to force those metaphors into this kind of interaction, so into the conversation. But that's, of course, not a good idea. So as designers and developers, we should stop for a second and try to think about how we can actually design and develop in the right way. So first of all, we have to think that when you design and develop for conversation, you have to think about all the rules of communication. And in particular, you have to focus on those 4. Meaning that, first of all, our system should be able to build meaning and also to share a precise context with the user. That's not easy, but there are some ways to do that. I will show this to you later. And also, the system should be able to evolve the set of data that it has about the user. So if you imagine to have a conversation with a fellow friend of yours or with an acquaintance, usually what happens is that you give to this person some information about yourself. This other person is hopefully remembering those information, otherwise the conversation would sound kind of awkward, and also would be probably quite annoying for you guys, because it could happen that then you have to repeat yourself a lot of times, and that's not nice, really. And also, the system should be able to getting to know you better over time, of course. And moreover, it should be able to remember the new information that you are giving. That's necessary, because otherwise the conversation cannot really take place in the right way. So what we follow on the design perspective is this process that you see here. So we started for a definition of the goal that our customer, but also the client of our customer might have. And this we did through a framework that I'm showing to you later on. Then we defined the personas, so like fictional target users that might use the skill. We also defined user stories in order to understand and analyze better the context. Then we prepared the real UI of the vocal user interface that are the script and the conversation flow. And I'm also going to show you later what these are. And afterward, we also collected some feedbacks from the real users through usability testing. So in order to define the goal, we started from a framework that it's called Customer Development Interviews. And it's invented by a woman from the US called Cindy Alvarez. She defined, let's say, a set of predefined questions that you might ask to your customer in order to frame his needs and also the product that you are building. That's really, really useful because if you use this exact question, this helps you to also to ask the question in the right way. And that's not really easy because sometimes you can ask the question in the wrong way and then you just get the answer that you were actually looking for from the user. And this, in the end, ends up in you building probably a product that it's not the right one for him. Afterwards, we defined the personas. Of course, we have defined many, many of them. So this means that like the traditional family that you see here, it's not the only one we targeted, of course, because there are cases in which there's a single parent, case in which the parents are of the same sex, and so on. These are all kind of users that might actually use our skill. This was also important because when you use a device like an Echo, you have also to imagine the context in which the Echo is going to be used. I don't know if you have ever used an Echo or a Google Home device before, but for sure, if you did, you notice that they don't work very well in very noisy environment. So this means that our context should have been like a context where the user can hear well what Alexa and the skill were saying, but also an environment where the device could catch really well what the user was asking. In order to define even better this, we have also defined the system personas. Because our system, in this case, is to use very precise words that a child should understand, but also the system should be able to understand a child between 2 and 4 years old, which, of course, is not easy sometimes. And also, let's say that the system should be a kind of storyteller, someone that is calmly, that is really kind to the child, and that the child can also, let's say, trust, and also the parents. Moreover, we define the user stories, and this helped us even better to define the context. That was really, really key for us in order to do that, because defining the context helps you also to define basically what the skill can do. Also in this case, we have defined many of them, and then we actually have chosen only some, so only the one that we thought could really match what we collected through the customer development interviews. After that, of course, we started to define the UI. I'm sorry that this is in Italian, but don't worry, I'm going to explain to you what's written in there. This is an example of script. So you should really imagine a script like the one you do, for instance, for a movie or for a play at the theater. But when you talk about a skill, of course, the two let's say, user and system that are interacting are, of course, Alexa and the user. The user is always the one starting the conversation. So you will never have the case in which Alexa is starting the conversation, because, of course, the one with the power, in this case, should always be the user. So you will always have the user say something like, Alexa, open, and then the skill name. Then Alexa is going to answer through the skill with a specific message that, of course, you are defining for the skill. And this message actually should vary every time that the user is accessing the skill. This because a key of a conversational interface is the variety. So when you define a graphical user interface, you are looking for consistency, but when you define a conversational interface, you are looking for variety. So we should give the user many synonyms, many different sentences. We should give him also the power to reach his goal in different ways, because that's the only way we can fake a good conversation. In this way, the conversation could look really close to the one you might have with a human. After that, we have also to define actually the real interactions, and this is not something you can do only defining the script. In order to do that, you have to create conversation flows. What are the conversation flows? They are basically diagram looking more or less like that, and they help you to find all, let's say, the part in which something could go wrong, but also they are going to help you to define the path that the user might follow. When you define the conversation flow, you usually start from the intent. So the intent are basically what your skill can do. You can see here an example. This is a skill that let the user planning a trip. You see here that the intent is plan my trip, very easy. Then you see also that there are some other terminology, like utterance, for instance. The utterance is what the user can tell to Alexa. In order to have a skill that is working properly, you have to define hundreds and hundreds of utterances. And that's not something that a human can do by himself, of course. But there's a very nice developer who has created this tool called Utterances Generator that everyone can use for free. And that lets you generate these hundreds and hundreds of utterances, based, of course, on the one that you enter first. And that's really key in order to create this variety I was telling you before. Then another very important point, of course, is teaming up with the other member of the team. So I worked personally very closely with the developers that were working on the skill itself. They have developed the first version of the skill with node.js, with the Lambda function. But of course, they were very proficient in using node.js, but they had no idea how to develop a skill, because consider that we did that in 2018. Alexa and Echo devices were not even in the Italian market yet. This because Amazon and this client of ours, they called us before the launch. So it's clear that we couldn't have any experience before, and we couldn't ask to other people really how to do that. So we tried to figure it out this together also with Amazon. They were really nice with us, actually. And so we worked together through all the phases, even in the phase where we collected the feedbacks from the real users. So we did some usability testing. Of course, we couldn't test with the Echo device because it was not released yet. So we tested with this other free tool that you can find on GitHub, and it's called VoiceX. Sorry, my voice is very bad today. Yeah, so we tested with this tool, and we did a usability test that it's called kind of Wizard of Oz, meaning that the tool is faking how Alexa is answering to the user. And as a designer, you are choosing from a preset of answers that you have, of course, inserted into the tool itself. And that was really interesting because we can see actually where we were kind of failing. But that's not all. Of course, there are some things I think we should not forget when we do something like that. First of all is user control and freedom. Of course, having something into your house that it's kind of listening to you sometimes, it's something that could worry us a lot. So we have always to think that the user has to be in control. He has to be free to stop the skill. He has to be free to exit when he wants to. He has to be in control and understand what he's doing with the skill and what the skill does. So that's a responsibility that we have as designers and developers, and that fortunately we can control through some of the intents that also Alexa is giving us ready to use. Like, for instance, the stop intent that lets you exit any skill you're using. The other point is flexibility and efficiency of use, so meaning that you have to use a lot of synonyms, generate all these utterances I was telling you before, otherwise the interaction is not working well. And also, again, that the user should be free to reach his goal in different ways. Last but not least, of course, it should be also able to access some help documentation. If the skill is very basic, maybe it's not that necessary, but if it's medium complicated, maybe you should think about it. And that's also something very easy to implement because there's an intent called help that the user can call, asking for help, and then the skill will get back to the user with some answers that are, of course, the one you defined. Of course, you always have to be ready for the unexpected because it's almost impossible to predict really every and each case. It's really complicated, but at least you can predict like the worst one. This through the conversation flow you can really do. But then what did we do in the end with Drupal Commerce? After we developed the skill in node.js and we used the Lambda function, we also realized that our client, since he's not a developer, he might want to add new nursery rhymes to the skill. And that if he wants to do this, he actually has to do this through us, because he has no other way. And this is something that he actually might not like that much. So we started to think how we could extend our skill so that basically you can control this part from Drupal Commerce. Our client is using Drupal since a lot of years. So this was something that for him was actually a very good idea. So, as I said, we started from Drupal Commerce. But before that, we started with this article that maybe all of you have read, or at least you heard about it. It's something that Dries wrote about Alexa and a module that is already available. But unfortunately, this module was not doing what we needed. So the developer that worked on that, he started first from that. So he started transforming the official Amazon TypeScript model into a PHP one. But then he kind of realized that was very fun, at least this is what he told me, but it was not the right solution. It was too complicated for what we really needed. In any case, you can, if you go to GitHub, you can actually try this exercise he did. It's available. So then he decided that probably the best idea was to develop a PHP SDK and then have this PHP SDK talk to a module. This is also available on GitHub already, so again, feel free to try it and to extend it if you want to. So he had this fantastic module that it's again already on GitHub if you want to try it. At the moment, the one that you find there, it looks kind of like this. So that's the interface we have thought about. We have, so for this demo, of course, we put the stickers of Drupal Dev Days and not nursery rhymes. So these are basically the product. So you can add the product there, and then from this admin interface, you can update the skill directly. So basically, what our user can do now is adding nursery rhymes and then update directly from there the skill. So he doesn't have to change anything into the Lambda function. He doesn't have to access the Alexa developer interface. Nothing of this. Here you see the settings of the module. And here, I think that's the only problem that he kind of encountered during the development. That is actually the authentication mechanism. Because, of course, what the user needs to do at the moment is to log in into the browser. And that could be kind of annoying, of course, but now we are working on fixing this. And our goal is then to release the module, of course, to the community. But if you have some technical question, you can ask this guy here. He's not He's not with us today. I'm really sorry. Well, he's a Drupal contributor since, I think, 2007 or 2006. You might know him. He was also one of the organizers of the Drupal Dev Days. And yeah, so he is the guy who kind of worked on the module with me. You can ask him questions on Twitter if you want. He is kind of waiting for them at the moment, so feel free to do it. Or you can also write him there. Don't ask technical questions to me, because I can for sure not answer in the right way. But I'm here for any design question if you want to. So thank you very much. I hope that was interesting, was brief, but I think we can do really a lot with this module. So if you guys feel like contributing, that would be really great. Thank you.
Okay. So my question is a bit about design. How many personas did you have more or less, and why the family type or gender of the parents or were such a big influence? Because actually I understand these are rhymes for the kids, right?
Yeah, well, the parents were very important because the child are between 2 and 4 years old. So, of course, this means that most of the time the parents are interacting with the skill. The gender, well, is not that important, but we wanted to analyze the context of use. So, of course, we have also created, let's say, a broader definition of the parents.
Yeah, but in the end, you end up with how many personas, more or less?
Ah, yeah, sorry. They were, in the end, 5.
Okay.
So not that many.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.